hardest hit probably in the state of Florida in terms of economic development projects gone bad. So your district includes Port St. Lucie. Let's talk about the Vaccine and Gene Therapy Institute and Digital Domain, which have cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. So we'll start with Crystal. Talk about those deals and how you would work as a lawmaker to safeguard taxpayers better in the future.
I think that's a wonderful example. Gil asked about small business and what I believe small business's role is. As I think those were great examples of us as the state of Florida giving taxpayers money and citizens in that county and in that city's money out as if it's a free-for-all. We made it rain for them to bring their businesses here. And now I believe they're mega churches. And even here in Martin County, where I serve as the vice chair of the LPA, we now have the ag tech zoning, which was supposed to merge the two counties, and it was going to be this giant symbiosis. And unless we're selling Bibles and pews and ag tech, I don't see what the use of it's going to be. So that is a wonderful example, and possibly even Torrey Pines going under, of 3 separate instances where Representative Harrell worked quite hard, I'm sure, maybe she won't admit to it right now, quite hard to bring them here and to court them, and for them to come and barely survive, and then to leave the St. Lucie County and the city of Port St. Lucie taxpayers with the bill, I think is horrible. And that's just one example of this administration and Rick Scott's administration and the idea that we need to go and we need to get people from outside, because there are not people living in Florida who would have loved a handout.
How would you work as a lawmaker to be more skeptical or to better vet such deals? Because, hindsight is one thing, but looking ahead, it's more challenging.
Well, I think that we could have looked at the fact that there was no industry here to support it. You could bring maybe one company and they could create a little bit of industry to support themselves, and then others could come. I mean, it was like this giant pioneering thing because we had scripts down off of Donald Ross Road that everybody obviously and their brother who is in biotechnology should want to move to Port St. Lucie or Palm Beach County. And so I think that inviting one company is one thing, but to invite 3 companies to come and set up shop in one area and totally devote an entire area of your county to it is just inappropriate. So I would, in the future, I would be really cautious to try and make this giant pioneering effort to create an industry that doesn't exist.
Thanks. Representative Harrell, this was an idea pioneered by Jeb Bush. You supported it.
Yes, to correct my opponent, it was Jeb Bush.
I was probably in high school.
It was not the current governor. But this was a vision that really, unfortunately because of the recession, never did materialize. And I think we invested heavily in, Port St. Lucie invested heavily in BGTI and Torrey Pines. Had the economy not folded, had DC and NIH not basically stopped funding various research projects, I think it would have been successful. I think there is still the ability for it to be successful. I think as we move forward, it is the beginning, I believe, of perhaps a medical complex that can grow. We have University, FSU, Seminoles, I'm a Gator, Seminoles, med school there now. There may be the ability for FSU to be able to use some of those facilities for their med school. There's lots of things that can happen there still to make that successful. I am working with the city of Port St. Lucie in order to see what we can do to move that forward and really create a little lemonade out of the lemon that the economy has given us. Digital domain did not happen on my watch, by the way. I was not in the legislature when that passed. And that was a true example of lack of transparency. How we move forward and how we make sure those kinds of things don't happen again is really all about transparency. All about if you're going to do incentives, and you need to really look very carefully at if you're going to do them and how you're going to do them. You need to make sure that you have transparency in the process and that you hold people accountable. You have tiered disbursements of payments. You don't give them an upfront large amount of money. We've learned from our mistakes. And that you make sure that there are benchmarks, that you measure as you go forward. And if the entity is not meeting their benchmarks, then you say, what's going on here?
Why didn't we see more of that under VGTI at least?
I think that was never in the original contract with them.
And
It
as
should-
a lawmaker, could you have advanced that, pushed that?
I think in hindsight, yes, that should have been part of the benchmarking, should have been part of it. And it's lessons learned, it's lessons learned. Everybody was very excited about a biotech sphere in St. Lucie County. VGTI, Torrey Pines in St. Lucie County, we had Scripps in Palm Beach, northern Palm Beach County, Burnham up in Orlando. And the idea, which was a very good idea at the time, was to really change the economics of Florida, move away from being so dependent on tourism. When you look at our general revenue, 15% of our general revenue comes out of Orlando. What happens when we have an incident like we just did in Orlando? What happens when the economy goes down? We saw that with the decrease in income to the state of Florida, when you have 15% of your GR dependent on one industry. The idea was to diversify the economy. I absolutely agree that small business is key. We're a state of small businesses. I ran a small business. I owned a small business. It is key to the success of Florida. But also, as we move forward, we need to continue to diversify and move away from just tourism. And that is a long-term goal. Yes, there's lessons learned. And yes, we need to make sure that we have much more transparency in what happens, and that we also put the appropriate accountability steps in place.